I'm going to read a little bit from the experimental memoir called The Betweens. At some point, I'm going to see if I can get the link into the chat. And next month, a book called Continuity is coming out from Octopus, and I'm going to read a couple poems from there. But The Betweens is what I'm going to read from first. It's pretty much almost like an experimental memoir with different, I don't know, vignettes, prose blocks, metaphors. It's kind of the kitchen sink in a way, but it's very interconnected. So just going to read a tiny bit. One day, a kid in my kindergarten class pulls out a tray of alphabetic blocks. He bothers me, but I can't remember what he says. I go off in the corner to get a little distance, but in memory, it's all approximate. My Chinese father drives me home with my older brother in the car. He claims the school called to say I had punched someone. He's proud of me. I have the distinct knowledge this never happened. I have never punched anyone in the face, but I also know it's making my dad proud of me. I sit in the back of the car and say nothing. My father might have imagined I was getting picked on for how I look, or it's a fight of his own. It's the first instance I remember of letting silence negotiate the remnants of a trauma. In a dream I had as a little girl, I'm sitting in the living room and someone wants to come in the house. I try to block them by putting my dollhouse up against the bottom of the door, but they crawl somehow into the dollhouse as a small person, grow bigger into a villain who's there to do something to my family. As a teen, I dream about hiding in patios, cupboards, floating up to the ceiling. I did not live through any wars, travel any oceans while a child, but these nightmares in which I practice being invisible feel inherited. The poet Farid Matuk talks about his daughter's night terrors. If he says he loves her, she screams more. If he says he's related to her, she screams more. If he says he will hug her, she screams even more. She screams for half an hour every night. He realizes the only thing he can do is back off and be absolutely quiet. Another way the silence does so much work. I noticed that Chinese people didn't think of me as Chinese. I told my dad how they'd say I wasn't, quote, a real Chinese, unquote. I felt stuck in a gray area between this reaction and the reaction to my playing piano, to good grades, to being quiet, that I was very Asian. My mom and dad kept neutral faces as I told this story and said not to say anything about it, to be quiet, let it ride, not to let my upset show. De non agir, have no reaction. The one who fights is losing, my dad would say. And then I'm going to just read a little bit from Continuity. Here's the first poem from Continuity, which is out next month. It's called Two Old Selves. The elderly swept their arms up in unison, pushing up the heavens, lion growing, mist sinking on in the horizon. At night, the stars checked plentiful against blackness, full of discount lightning. Hectic Manhattan's Chinatown, that drawer of sidewalk and rings, no room to pass either side. 5 billion people, those were the days. To cover the world with more apples, to cover the ground around back porches, and also to show what and who endures in this nowhere pavilion of necessities. I awoke, shining outside the city, these eyes at the other side of a lake's alarm, apple in my stomach. It played a lunar light and saw two selves, the one who wants to be faithful to a history and one who prefers the actual. They walk away from the corner, each down separate roads. How to call the other world, yourself in the middle of all spines. This best moment for calling the ancestors on whether or not to be the self that could get away with murder, Yes, for clarity on how to become the self that changes suffering to nothing. Asking yourself when making these nail and yarn dolls, you so disappointed by the strangleholds of evil men, do I wish this person, this doll, represents some harm or some good? And let's see. This is a very Philly poem called Fix. The restaurants crammed at every hour with well-groomed people eating London broil, the sheen on their hair, unbreakable glass. You can hear the asteroid coming, the water lead-filled, the air too hot. And dear left eye, please stop shaking, babe, it's okay. Even the hour when the birds start chirping makes a hyphen between words, a corrective to things haphazard. In listening and wakefulness, no sound from anything, no one in the street, loading the air with curses or cures. I go for the brightest thing I can stand. Click, complete order. And I'm just going to read one more poem. This poem has a lot to do with my brothers. And some of you may have found yourself in the situation in the last, um, 4 or 5 years where it's gotten difficult to communicate with your siblings for different reasons, having to do with the national, I don't know, state of affairs. This one's called Veil from Anapos, which is, I think, place in Greece. You throw this pretend net on your brother and struggle to keep him still. His face a grammatical diagram under veil, playing wild hermit. When you stamped on the blanket edges, a gratis field, a thing made for proving clouds, cloud in its remainder. This veil with apertures, 5 or 1,000 of them. Fine lines compose this thing, your hair kept back, wind you kept, a net you kept here, not in the middle. Throw this veil on ancestors and find the seams empty, their faces only what you have left in photos. What pure Irish bones, the blood's a mixed drink, and what loops back, cottons onto report, and an umbilical anchor. Nearing your answers, you wrestle the hands and arms your brother used to keep you from falling. Thank you so much.